Welcome, everyone. Tonight's session is the American Marketing Association's Collegiate Conversation session, and our focus today is on ethics, social responsibility, and influencer marketing. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Point Park University Rollins School of Business, for supporting this session. I'm Doreen Saletti. I am an AMA Pittsburgh board member, and I'm also an associate professor and program director for the marketing and sales program at Point Park's Rollins School of Business. The American Marketing Association Pittsburgh chapter is the essential community for marketers in the region. No other organization provides more ways for marketers and academics to connect with the people and the resources they need to be successful. So we invite you to join us, and to learn more about AMA Pittsburgh, you can visit us online at www.amapittsburgh.org. Before we begin tonight's session, I do want to make you aware of two upcoming sessions that may be of interest. One is on March 2nd, we will have our first AMA Pittsburgh Faculty Development Series session, How to Run a Case Competition, Tips and Techniques for Online, On-Ground, and Co-Curricular Competition. The timing is fantastic because we are in the midst of the AMA Pittsburgh Collegiate Case Competition right now. So please go to the website, amapittsburgh.org, to register, or the link is on the slide. But you can join Dr. Nan Nichols and Dr. Kurt Schimmel to learn more about running case competitions in a variety of formats. We also have our next collegiate conversation coming on March 22nd. The focus there is, so you want to work in marketing. So that would be a great session for students who want to learn more about marketing careers, what it takes to get into marketing, and what it takes to succeed in marketing. So let's move into today's session, ethics, social responsibility, and influencer marketing. So I want to take a moment to introduce you to the session and to today's panelists. Invasion of privacy, stereotyping, sponsorship transparency, unethical data collection, artificial intelligence, deceptive pricing and messaging. Ethical dilemmas are not new or exclusive to marketing. So today's session will examine ethics, social responsibility, and influencer marketing, which are sure to be timely topics for marketers. From luxury goods to mass consumables, influencer marketing is used by many organizations as a means to build connections with an audience. But how does an audience know a message is coming from a paid influencer? What is the responsibility of the influencer and of the organization? Influential PR and marketing communications professional Caroline Constantine, a public relations strategist at Pipitone Group, is a master collaborator, a communications strategist, and a storyteller obsessed with finding ways to increase buzz and to impact culture at every turn. With more than a decade of experience in PR, influencer relations, marketing communications, and digital marketing for startups and global consumer brands, she brings her expertise in influencer marketing to today's session. So welcome, Caroline. Corporate social responsibility can improve a consumer's perception of brands and organizations. But is it more than just a buzzworthy concept? A growth hacker with more than 20 years experience in building global and startup brands through innovative strategy and omnichannel marketing, Carlos Tribino is Chief Executive Officer for The Machine, a marketing consultancy and winner of a 2016 Business Ethics Award. He'll share his expertise in ethics and corporate social responsibility. Welcome, Carlos. And Carlos is also an AMA Pittsburgh board member, I should add. Do marketers care about morality when they're making business decisions? According to research, the answer is yes. A professor of marketing at Messiah University, Dr. David Hagenbuch is founder of Mindful Marketing, a web-based organization dedicated to encouraging ethical marketing, and he's founder of the Mindful Matrix, a tool to examine ethical issues in marketing. He will share an academic and practitioner perspective on ethics and mindful marketing. So with that, welcome to David, to Carlos, and to Caroline. And let's get our conversation started. And I'd like to start with you, David. How do we define ethics in marketing?
Yeah, I first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Pittsburgh AMA and Doreen. I love to talk about ethics with anybody, and when it's marketing ethics, that makes it even better. One of the first things I think is important to do is to distinguish the difference between what we're often used to talking about in business and in other areas of life too, is positive science versus ethics. So I always think back to, I think it was in grade school when some of you probably did this too, the volcano experiment, where you take some vinegar and you put baking powder in it and it fizzes up. Of course, that's a cause-effect relationship. You don't ask, well, should the concoction foam up? That's just what it does. The ethical issues are about questions of should and ought, not just what happens, but what ought to happen, what should happen. So to kind of take this to a marketing application, thinking now that we're spending so much time online, of course, we see a provocative picture of some sort and a bold heading under it. And, you know, maybe it's a sexually explicit photo with some kind of a caption that just makes us go, well, should I click on that? And it's for window treatments or something that's completely unrelated. Well, if a company A/B tests that, they might find out that using whatever kind of clickbait type of an image and caption actually gets more clicks and views than if they wouldn't do that. So the positive science answer to the question is yes. You know, if we use this, we'll get, you know, X number more responses. The ethical question is, should we do it? You know, is this the right thing to do? Ought we to make this choice? So for me, ethics is about choosing the good, doing the right thing.
Sorry about that, getting caught up in the cycle of muting and unmuting. So how do we, when you think about how we define ethics, and thanks for giving us a basis for the conversation, can you talk about why it's an ongoing concern for organizations?
Yeah, so there's probably any number of things that we've all read recently, like within the last couple of years especially. And I think of one particular demographic, Gen Z, which, you know, more than any of the other age cohorts seems to be increasingly interested in working for organizations and buying from organizations that are socially responsible on one level, but also ethical. You know, they're doing the right things. So any organization that either wants to sell to that generation, and that's, you know, that's true to a certain extent of every generation, not just Gen Z, but they want to market to that organization, or they want to employ those people. That's a very tangible, practical type of a reason why you want to be the kind of company that they want to buy from and that they want to work for. The bigger reason is, I think, as we look at what we're doing in our field and wanting to know, are we making a difference? Are we having a positive influence on the individuals and the organization and society overall? There should be a compulsion there that goes beyond just the bottom line, but again, doing the right thing. And I think as more and more organizations look to do that, those that don't are increasingly positioning themselves in the minority and becoming under even more scrutiny for not doing the right things.
Consumers care, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and again, to the credit of Gen Zs, and I know we have many Gen Zs on the call, probably well, some of my students and other students here represented, and they're probably, hopefully they're shaking their heads that, yeah, we care. And they're getting us to care more too, which is great.
Fantastic. And I do want to invite the audience to feel free to use the chat to ask any questions that you might have as we move through our discussion for our panelists. Post them at any point and we will do our best to get to all of the questions. So let's differentiate social responsibility from ethics, because we are talking about both of those topics. And while they do have some overlap, they are certainly not the same. So, Carlos, can you talk a bit about how we define corporate social responsibility?
Sure, very well, thanks. First of all, thanks very much for having me here. Very glad to participate. And thanks everyone for attending. So yeah, I think David, gave a great description of ethics. I think ethics is about doing the right thing, about the fundamentals of just being within the being legal, being ethical, doing the right thing, being honest, etc. And those are the fundamentals that you need as a company, as an organization, as an institution to function properly, right? I think corporate social responsibility takes it a level further, where there was a time when everybody, business schools kept teaching everybody, the only responsibility of a company is maximizing shareholder value, right? Those times are long gone, right? Right now, companies need to do a lot more than that and get involved in the communities, create jobs, create growth in the community where they act, and then address the issues, right? Current issues that could be anything from the environment to racism or whatever the case may be. They need to get more involved. They need to take initiatives to do that. We did a study many years ago in the early 2000s where we interviewed 100 CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies, and in North America and Europe, and just to find out, how important, corporate social responsibility was in their agenda, and it had climbed at the time into the top 5, in addition to sales and growth and so forth. It was a little higher on the scale in Europe than in North America. In that sense, the Europeans were a little bit ahead of the curve. But it was climbing, definitely climbing up the ladder here. And we can see that, and to David's point also, it has become more and more of a prerequisite to be in business, to get, socially involved in a proactive manner. And as it becomes more important to certainly to Gen Zers, and I would say even to millennials as well.
Again, connecting to consumers from a variety of generations, that can be really important as a consideration for organizations.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually getting a question that connects these already in the chat. Companies codify ethics and CSR through something like a code of conduct, and we'll need to create an organizational culture that enforces that. So how do we teach marketers, marketing students, marketers in general, to be more ethical?
I think the main one of the main things is that to put your money where your mouth is. It's companies. I've been in situations where I think a very good guiding light is always a company's mission, vision, and values, right? You should always you should be very careful in developing those and very strict in following them. And I think not just marketers, but C-suite executives in general, when things get rough, they tend to kind of bend a little bit the rules, and sometimes when you have to what seems to be the right thing, but may be in conflict with profits or growth, that's when companies tend to get a little queasy about it, and not commit to it. And I think it's important for companies to stick to that, to keep the commitment, and to not let the pressure or the short-term loss compromise their values or their actions.
And I think even as individuals, we can think about that perspective of the pressure that we might feel when it comes to things like ethics and social responsibility, and the importance of not compromising our values as well at the individual level, and then how that relates to the organizational level. David, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Carlos. That's perfect. And I love the way you kind of put social responsibility in context with ethics and legality and economics, things like that. That's so important. It reminds me of Archie Carroll's pyramid, which maybe we'll take a look at later on. But I did a little bit of research on this myself a few years back, and then increasingly hearing this kind of thing, where organizations that really fire on all cylinders find ways to do their social responsibility that also impacts positively the bottom line. Because I think for a lot of organizations, it's kind of a false dichotomy. It's like, well, either we have to be socially responsible or unethical, you could put into that too, or we earn money. And there's some really good examples. There's a Harvard Business Review article quite a few years ago that was written about this. And I think it was maybe Michael Porter may have been one of the authors on that, but on the idea that you can integrate your social responsibility with your bottom line. And of course, we hear often about, double or triple bottom line companies, but just kind of a silly example, I guess, that I think might work along this line is Domino's recently had this campaign where they bought gift certificates from other restaurants, local restaurants, to give to their own customers, which on the surface, you think, why in the world would they do that? I mean, it's like they want people to buy pizza from them, not other organizations. But they were, with everything that was happening in the economy and wanting to support, local businesses, they took a lead on that and actually spent like $100,000, which to them is a drop in the bucket. But nonetheless, they did that. And, as you think about it, you think, well, did that really, do anything for those organizations? Well, apparently it did from the interviews that they had in the ad. But also you think of Domino's and they would want to be associated with food delivery, with food service and anything like that. So in other words, they could have cut a check to the World Wildlife Fund or something like that, which would have been great. But at the same time, what do animals have to do with pizza? It's not perceptually for consumers, it's not easily to connect the dots on those. But they give to restaurants, so it's food, it's in their industry, so to speak. And suddenly they're doing something that's socially responsible, that the publicity and things that they got from that, I think helped to move the needle on their marketing. But it's also something that people can connect with Domino's readily. So they think food, they think Domino's. So again, that's kind of a silly example of it, but those kind of things are happening more and more I think on large levels where, it's overlapping the two, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it's not just about taking the action, it's about amplifying the fact that you are taking the action, which is what Domino's did by developing a campaign around that decision.
Right. Now, the only wrinkle on that I certainly can hear people pushing back on, and I've thought of it myself, I think they spent like $100,000 in the gift cards. They probably spent $1 million or more advertising that they did it. So you think, is that a little disingenuous for them to, spend relatively little on the gift cards and then, promote it as much as they did? So that's debatable, but yeah, still they got some good publicity from it.
They certainly did. Yeah. And when we think about amplifying messages, this is actually a great lead in to bring Caroline into the conversation when we talk about influencer marketing, because that's a big part of what influencer marketing is, isn't it? Getting somebody who has the stage to amplify a message. So Caroline, can you talk to us a little bit about influencer marketing?
Yes, thank you. An excellent insight, David and Carlos, so far. A somewhat textbook, if you want to call it that, definition of what influencer marketing is traditionally a form of social media marketing that involves using an influencer or group of influencers to market a product or service on behalf of a brand, as an extension of their brand voice and their marketing efforts. And so obviously, making sure that you have the right voice amplifying your message is crucial. You can't have anybody be unethical or, not displaying the same, CSR message that your company is trying to display in their mission and their values.
So what are some of, we know that this is happening with greater and greater frequency, the use of influencers in marketing efforts. What are some of the key concerns then? You mentioned the alignment with values. Are there other key concerns both on the company's side, the organization side, and what about on the influencer side?
Absolutely, definitely. And great point. A statistic that, we share readily with our clients is that 55% of marketers leveraged influencer marketing in 2019. So we're thinking like pre-pandemic times. And that number is predicted to jump to 72% this year in 2022. So we know that an increasing number of brands are, adding influencer marketing to their plan, or maybe even exclusively using influencer marketing as part of their plan. And then, of course, on the flip side, influencers have built this sometimes six-figure business on, they're simply being influencer marketers, and that is their full-time job. So from a brand side, I think first and foremost, you need to know your audience and your audience demographics and their interests well before you form any kind of campaign, because ultimately you're going to want to tailor your influencer campaign to establish a better connection with your audience. And that can look like obviously, first and foremost, selecting the right person or group of people that are the right fit for your brand. Do they align with your brand values, your mission, your vision, like I said, but are they an authentic extension of your voice? And, honestly, at the end of the day, do they authentically consume your product or use your services? Are they a follower of your brand already before, you reach out and engage with them for a campaign? Ultimately, will this partnership result in a good ROI for you? And then, you have to, organizations need to be prepared ahead of the game. So even before that first conversation, making sure that you have anticipated what the response will look like from your audience in partnering with an influencer. If you're giving a discount or offering something free, do you have all of that in mind to make it streamlined and seamless so it doesn't look like, inauthentic, like another ad? So ultimately, you want to make sure that, all of these key factors have been considered in developing a campaign holistically from the start before you even engage with influencers to speak on your behalf. And then if we talk about, what influencers should be concerned about, similarly, most of the same things, will my audience, my followers resonate with the brands that I partner with. If I'm a fashion blogger, for instance, and then I partner with a car manufacturer, will that be in line with my lifestyle brand? Or will people say, oh my goodness, they just wanted to get a lot of money from Audi, or whatever it may be? Do I, as the influencer, again, follow the brand, consume a brand or service? And will I have all the information that I want to share? Once my audience starts engaging with my content, do I know enough about the product that I'm, backing to be able to answer their questions and look like I'm really involved in the conversation? And then, will this fit into my existing content calendar? Again, not only my brand, influencers have all kind of put themselves in their own niche, but, does this make sense? Would it be insensitive for me to post something right before, a big holiday that I don't believe in, ultimately, influencers in this day and age, since we know this is a marketing tactic and a business for them, will I be compensated fairly for my time? Content creators spend a lot of time working on these campaigns and working on this content that we might trivialize a little bit and think, oh, that only took 30 seconds to post, but ultimately there was a lot of time involved. So those are the things that both organizations and influencers alike are similarly thinking of.
There's definitely a lot to consider on both sides. And we actually have another question in the chat that I'll share with you. So is it the alignment of the influencer's authenticity and ethics with the companies that creates the brand authenticity, or vice versa?
I think it's both. And I think ultimately that's something that, as much as a brand will evaluate who they're partnering with and what does their image look like, and have they been, recently involved in any kind of damaging, brand damaging happenings or, headline news. I think it's both. The influencer should also be looking very closely at what the company has done, and again, what the company's mission and responsibility is to align with their values. Everything from their website to their, could even be to their CSR report that year, or are they have the influencers evaluated all facets of the partners that they're choosing, and then vice versa. So I really think it goes both ways in order for it to really be an authentic fit.
No, that makes sense. That alignment is so critical. And
Hey,
let's get our audience involved, because especially given that we have many students in the audience. So you all probably know how to use the Zoom hand raising function. So how many of you have made a purchase based on an influencer? Use the hand raising function, and let's see if we can get just a quick look at how many of you have been influenced by an influencer.
Raising my own hand.
All right, so that's just, well, wow, that's a lot of our audience has been influenced by an influencer. So go into the chat and type in the influencer who has made a difference for you, an influencer that you follow or that has influenced your purchases. So again, non-scientific, but we'll take a look at what comes up and who comes up. And as you do that, feel free to put your hands down now. We got a quick look at that. I want to think about, we talked about influencer marketing and some of the key concerns for influencers and organizations. So zooming out for a minute, let's go back to kind of that bigger picture of ethics. What are some of the common ethical challenges, if we can categorize them? What are some of the common ethical challenges that marketers face, or that the organization faces, when we're talking about making product and promotional decisions?
Yeah, if I could jump on that one, and also kind of with it, I have a question that it really relates to what I'm about to say for Caroline. I'm wondering if she would answer it. But the issue that I see that comes up probably more than any other is deception. And that, of course, that's a broad issue, but there's any number of issues within that, and including one for influencer marketing that I'm going to ask her about in a moment. But the reason I say that is marketers naturally operate from a position that you could call like informational superiority. In other words, to think about it, anybody that's working for an organization, owns an organization, they should know more about the product or services than the consumers do. So it's very easy for a marketer or anybody else in that organization to present information that's either partially true, an exaggeration, or even a complete lie. So again, I think deception, there's so many other issues too, but that's probably the one that I tend to see come up more than any others, and for that reason. But Caroline, I'm wondering this, speaking of deception, have you seen it as an issue very often where people don't know who is a paid influencer versus just someone that just seems like they're anybody on social media, they're just out there talking about, objectively products that they've purchased and so on. Because for me, I think that's one of the main concerns I would have with influencer marketing. Because if I'm being sold to, I'd like to know that. But on the other hand, if there's someone that's a family member or friend who I know doesn't have a horse in the race, so to speak, with products, then my perceptual defenses are going to lower, and I'm going to take more of what they say, at face value, thinking that they don't have any other incentive to tell me, anything otherwise. So do you find that to be the case very often with influencers?
Absolutely. And I think I want to address that kind of in two parts, David. So the first part is that there are regulations in this space, obviously, when it comes to paying advertisers. So the FTC's rules literally state that influencers must reveal their relationships with brands within their post in some form. So what's happened now in the popularity and I guess the visibility with influencers is influencers, probably alongside brands, have figured out ways to, I don't want to call it deceptive, but to almost bury that in their content so that it can feel a little bit more like what you said, like the influencers speaking to their friends of 300,000 followers about a brand that they so believe in so strongly, but ultimately were paid for. So I think it really is important, again, back to, being an actual user of a product and knowing a lot about the product from an influencer's perspective and a brand alignment perspective and who they partner with, that can help eliminate that. Mm-hmm. However, using hashtag ad and kind of burying that in the content does feel somewhat deceptive to the audience and to users. And I think, it looks, I think, so two things. It really depends, again, on what the topic is and what the content is. But I think at the end of the day, a way that marketers who may be adverse to using influencer marketing as a tactic to avoid this and to avoid deception, even if there is a FTC regulate, even if they're following their plan by the books, is to leverage nano influencers. So again, influencers are such a broad topic, but if you look at it from a macro, micro, and even a nano perspective, like Kim Kardashian aligning with a brand, whether she says this is paid or not, most people would know, okay, well, Kim Kardashian was paid for this and she may or may not like this product, right? But a lot of people don't care and they will still purchase it because aligning Kim Kardashian to your product is gold, right? However, to have an authentic campaign that really feels right on all fronts, a brand might consider partnering with somebody who has less than 10,000 followers, who has less than 5,000 followers, but is really engaged with this niche audience, with this group of people that might be really specific to a product set. And that's an example I was planning to share a little bit later on, and how that's worked for a company that I've worked for. But ultimately, when you know that the influencer is really engaged with their audience, knows a lot about this product or this category or this industry, whether they were paid or not, and they announce it or not, if they have a smaller, more engaged following, that can usually, deliver all results and kind of, eliminate all fears that you might have mentioned.
This is a topic that's definitely of interest to the audience. And I will say, I took a quick look through the chat, and it shows that I'm certainly not a Gen Z, because I only recognized one name among the influencers listed, and that was Steph Curry. But we did get a comment or a question. So as we're talking about influencers and the alignment and the recognition of marketing happening with their efforts, is this similar to the "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV" that there's, when somebody is selling something medical?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Another, I guess, example of a failed campaign, not to only talk about Kim Kardashian here, but she partnered with a drug company a couple years back. I believe it was actually might have been like 2017. And the drug was for morning sickness, and she was very open during her pregnancy about having morning sickness. I think it was her first pregnancy, actually. And her her caption didn't disclose all of the information about the product, like side effects and things like that, if you run a traditional ad for, a drug, a prescription medication, there's all kinds of regulations and information that you have to include. We see it every day in commercials, right? And so that was perceived as deceptive. It got all kinds of horrible engagement. Everyone was upset because it was almost like she was giving a medical opinion, and she's certainly not a doctor, and was not disclosing all of the information that, the FDA had required her to disclose. So the campaign was terrible on all fronts, hurt the brand, hurt her, her followers were upset. And I think, an influencer should never speak on a topic they're not prepared to speak about. They should never engage in a campaign that they're not ready to engage in. And then similarly, a brand should decide, are influencers right for my product category? Just because influencers are the buzzword and the tactic that everyone's trying, might not work for prescription drug providers because of all of the regulations and all of the fine print. So I think it's really important to know, am I an expert? Am I a subject matter expert? And does influencer marketing work for my industry?
Well, Carol, if I can add, oh, sorry.
Oh, please do, Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think it's the influencer space is going so big that, and it's becoming so, you just mentioned, Carol, I think 72% or so of people are using it. I'm surprised it's not even higher, but it's becoming, I think it's self-regulating itself in terms of becomes such a mainstream marketing tool right now, that I think people are trending. And Caroline, you may know more of this. I'd love to hear your opinion too. But what I've seen, for instance, we're right now working with a gaming company, and we're engaged with a bunch of influencers. And gamers can be pretty, they're not the most polished group. They're streaming on Twitch at like midnight, and with a bunch of like weird hats and in the garage and whatnot, and they're going on TikTok and so forth. And they're extremely polished. These kids and guys or people that we're working with, in terms of they're very legit. They're calling out every time. They always mention that we're being sponsored by these people, or we're being they're supporting us or whatnot. And they're very they very much play by the rules, and they're very careful about everything that goes and everything they say and what they expose their audience to. So very high degree of transparency. And I was surprised to see how polished they were in their behavior. And I think, and I'm hoping, the optimist in me, that the space will continue to go in that direction and be less of the Wild West and more of that. And I think also today there are so many platforms that you can use to filter them out, right? Because there's a lot of like also fake influencers with fake followers. And if you get quality people, I think it goes a long way in just aligning with the right people so that properly represent your brand.
And that really connects to another question that came in. Do you feel that people who are paid to do ads and the brand and represent the brand aren't as convincing or authentic for the audience, right? And I think that goes to some of the things that Carlos, you were just mentioning with the gamers and the authenticity that they were able to bring and the polished nature of their marketing. And Caroline, you were mentioning having that fit, that alignment.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that question is a question I would ask back to the audience who all raised their hand and said that they have been influenced by an influencer, right? And I think that the answer is, if you believe in a person and that person believes in a product or service, then you will then want to also believe in that product and or service. And an example that just comes to mind in my head is there's so many fashion influencers in the space. It's like a very cluttered space, actually. And this has evolved over, from a very short period of time, like from when I was in college, 12 years ago. And at the end of the day, this business has grown so much. And to your point, Carlos, people have gotten better because they've learned from their mistakes and they've figured it out. So, a popular fashion influencer who might have taken money from an early adapter in the influencer space, Walmart, who saw influencer marketing catching on years ago and started testing the waters and paying influencers. They might have learned, hey, I posting high luxury goods every day, and then I partnered with Walmart. That's not on brand, and they might have said no before. They've now maybe learned that can be on brand because they've learned more about their audience to say that, well, while everyone might like a luxury product every now and then, they sure would love to know when there's something great going on at Walmart that also looks like my lifestyle brand. So I think, the tactics are evolving, the partnerships are evolving, everyone's kind of getting better and learning what fits with them. And then ultimately that's resulting in success and sales. But on the flip side of that, I think it's really important to be clear, that you are partnering with, again, to use the same example, Walmart, to say that, while I don't normally shop at Walmart, I'm shopping at Walmart now because I know that you're looking for XYZ and Walmart provides that for you, rather than, just showing up one day with a Gucci bag and the next day with a Walmart purse.
Yeah. Hey, Doreen, if I can jump in here on this, I think to tie what you just said, Caroline, together to the question in a more even a broader way, you could ask the question: is any form of paid promotion unethical inherently? Because you're thinking about it, someone is being paid to tell you something. Is that automatically a conflict of interest? Now that could send us all, questioning our careers. But I think what it comes down to is what you're implying there, Caroline, is it's about trust. And if the person who is whether it's a micro influencer or, a Super Bowl ad, that there's some element of trust that, that company, that individual is getting something out of it, but they're also giving something to me of value, and they're not taking advantage of me. So just like it's worth our while to pay a real estate agent or a car salesperson the commission on the vehicle or the house, it's also worthwhile to have value go to any of these sources of marketing because we're getting value in return.
That's important to understand with marketing in general, is that there should be some exchange of value. And actually, one of the questions that came in to the chat is a really interesting one about fallacy marketing. False authorities have been used in marketing, often unethically. So is this just kind of the next wave of that happening with these influencers? And tying that to another question, how do you know if a company is ethically representing, if the company is marketing ethically to you, if their products or services are being represented through an influencer, and that's really the main connection.
I don't want to continue to speak if anyone else has
So
thought.
what's the question again? How do you know as a consumer whether a company's marketing to you ethically? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's for the most part it's very difficult because it's, you know, nobody knows what happens in the back room in terms of, you know, targeting, privacy violation, or whatnot, you know, whatever may be happening. So it's very difficult to do that. But I do think, to David's recent point, I think there's a level of trust that companies build with consumers in almost always either doing the right thing or going out of their way to do the right thing. And if they hire, you know, whomever, Tiger Woods or whomever, to either endorse a product, or if they hire a micro, you know, influencer, that they're not doing it in a deceptive way. But I think that comes in mostly, I would argue it's very difficult for a consumer, even for regulators sometimes, to know exactly how ethically companies are marketing products. But it's a long-term building of trust with your behavior and with your actions, and with gaining that trust from consumers that then leads you to believe that the company is doing the right thing. And certainly a lot of trustworthy brands have gotten red-handed here and there throughout history, and had to, you know, do a PR ploy to correct that. And that happens, people make mistakes sometimes, you know, but I think it's a long-term relationship and the reputation that you build throughout the years.
That's so important to think about, that relationship and the trust, whether it's a relationship that a consumer forms with an influencer that allows that influence to occur, whether it's the relationship a consumer forms with a particular brand and through the messaging that is shared. And I think, you know, this is a great time for us to start thinking about some examples. I want to make sure we get to some examples. And maybe, David, you could give us a bit of a framework for that with your mindful marketing model before we look at some additional examples.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do a brief screen share here. And can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So over the years, Gallup does this poll every year where it questions people about, or surveys people about the honesty and ethical standards of a whole series of occupations. And I was always very disappointed to see that at the bottom of the list are often marketing positions, advertising practitioner, insurance salespeople, car salespeople. So all that to say that it kind of got me thinking, is there a way of actually branding ethics? Of course, we brand everything in marketing. Why can't we come up with something that would make ethics a little stickier? So, and of course, most of us in business are familiar with like the Boston Consulting Group portfolio matrix. So the branding and portfolio matrix, and I kind of thought about it for quite a long time and came up with this idea of a mindful matrix with some fanciful terms, just like the Boston Consulting Group matrix has. But on the y-axis, is it good marketing, basically? I say, does it create stakeholder value? Well, that's for all the stakeholders, not just the stockholders, but everybody that has a stake in the company. Does it do the things that marketing we've learned does and should do well? Because number one, it needs to be effective. If it's not effective marketing, then why even talk about it? But then secondly, does it uphold these 5 universal values? And I've seen these represented time and time again in various organizations, codes of ethics and different publications that I've read, academics and others. So for me, this was just a way of marrying the two, which we're always trying to do intuitively, but it puts a little more teeth in, and again, makes it a little stickier. So if it does both those things, you know, it's mindful. If it's good marketing, but it doesn't uphold the values, it's single-minded. If it gives you a nice warm fuzzy, ethical, but it doesn't move the needle on marketing, then it's simple-minded. And if it doesn't do either of the two, that's terrible. That's mindless marketing. So that's the paradigm that I came up with. And students that are on the call here from Messiah, most of them have probably seen this in classes that I've used, and some other faculty, different institutions are using it as well. It's nothing new. It's not a reinvention of anything. It's just taking things that we already talk about, and it's providing a springboard for conversation. And if anything, I always say it's not to try to get agreement on these things. Like you and I might disagree on, is it mindful, single-minded, whatever. The most important thing is that we're having that conversation and we're able to not talk past each other, but use similar language and stuff for people that have any worldview. So that's the idea behind mindful marketing. So let's stop.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because that can give us some perspective as we look at some examples and think about how ethical, how socially responsible they might be. So Carlos, would you like to share some examples that maybe connect to social responsibility or connect to, I know you've done a lot of work in technology and machine learning.
Yeah, so more than an example, since you brought up the subject of machine learning, I've done a little bit of research in the ethics of AI and machine learning, and it's just a fascinating early stage space where it's got a lot more questions than answers at this point. But it's like, how do you when you're thinking, and in marketing, to be sure, it has less consequences than in many other areas, or the consequences are less tragic, let's say. But how do you, as we go towards more and more, we're seeing this on Google and Facebook and whatnot, and more of our marketing is getting driven by machine learning and AI. How do you teach machines to do the right thing? How to, in a very, let's say, in a very simple way, if you have we're living in the city of autonomous vehicles, right? How do you teach what goes into the algorithm to tell a vehicle, so that a self-driving car, to either come to a sudden stop and risk an oil tank behind it crushing it and creating an explosion, or possibly running into a school bus? Who makes that split-second decision? How do you teach that? So if you take that to marketing, when the algorithms start learning unethical ways of targeting or pricing or distributing even, what in the field of AI and machine learning, how do we teach the machines that, and who's responsible and who regulates it? So it's not an example, but since you brought that up, I wanted to raise that because I find it a fascinating topic as to how that's going to evolve, and who's going to be making the calls, because it's going to be the companies to some extent, the developers, but also it's going to be some lot of regulation coming in.
Yeah, it's certainly a very complex issue, and it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds as we continue to use technology and integrate it in more significant ways, both in our lives and in marketing efforts. Yeah.
Right now, as far as one thing that I wanted to highlight, which is kind of interesting and related, is as far as an example, there's a lot of the tools that a lot of especially in the area of real estate and other searches, people, the platforms are unable to provide you with certain targeting capabilities, right, for ethical reasons, because it could lead to discrimination, right? And for instance, I did it just as a test run, which is interesting. I searched for a particular ethnic group in a stock photography's website, and I came up empty-handed. The platform will not let you discriminate by any kind of racial profile. Then I Googled the same search with the same stock photography house in it, and it gave me tons of results from the same website. So the website is regulating against the use of potentially unethical manners of searching, yet Google allows you to do that and delivers all the results. So how do you, to what level are the companies responsible for allowing or not allowing that?
Yeah, that's certainly an important question.
Mm-hmm.
So Carolyn, connecting that then to influencer marketing and to authenticity, as Carlos mentioned, what responsibility is it on companies to try to deal with some of these challenges, these ethical issues? Do you have some examples that you can share related to influencer marketing, either on the kind of concerning side versus companies that were working hard to do the right thing and portray their product along with that influencer very effectively and ethically?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've shared a couple already that have not worked and maybe have been perceived unethical. So an example of something that I personally worked on that I think we really hit the mark and did it right, that I can share. So previously I worked for a lingerie startup, and our target market was plus size women. And no one on our team was a plus size woman. So to be marketing a product that we weren't users of and that we couldn't really speak intimately to the end result and to the product feature benefits, that was certainly a concern of ours. We wanted to be authentic, but we knew we created a really excellent product that served this awesome need. So ultimately, we felt like our best authentic voice would be to work with influencers that were users of the product. And so we built an influencer program that was more like an ambassador program than a traditional influencer marketing, tactical campaign. And back to something I said earlier, we worked with nano influencers. So, rather than finding a plus size model, maybe, that has a lot of notoriety and followers, we really wanted to hear more intimately from the voices, the users of our product. So we started there with our users, and we reached out to customers to see if customers wanted to engage, and kind of evaluated what level of influence and what sphere of influence are our customers currently in. And we found that there was this really incredible community of women that we really kind of tapped into, and created these nano micro influencers that we called our ambassadors, and a play on words with our brand, what they were actually called. But and ultimately, we generated brand awareness for our product and created this kind of movement where we not only used these nano influencers as an extension of our marketing efforts, in a traditional influencer sense, but we included them in focus groups and product development, and we really listened and did it right, from start to finish. It wasn't just a marketing tactic or a PR play. It was truly, we wanted input, and we wanted authentic stories, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing the best by our customers. So, we did things like not approving talking points in advance. We were willing to take the risk because we felt so good about this community that we built, that one of our partners might say something that we might not have liked. Something, there's the good and the bad, right? So when it comes to building trust, we wanted to hear the bad, and we were comfortable with them sharing that bad, even without us taking a look at it in advance. So we really tried to be mindful from a full scope perspective in what we were communicating and what they were communicating on behalf of our brand.
Well, it sounds like you were hitting both sides of David's matrix, both on the ethical side and on the marketing impact side itself. And you even used the term mindful, so perfect way to bring it all together.
Excellent.
Good job, Caroline.
Yeah, I studied in advance.
Luckily, there are no quizzes tonight, so the students can all relax. David, is there maybe an example that you'd like to share of an organization who is either mindfully or mindlessly marketing?
Well, I can't top Caroline's example for mindful, because that works on so many different levels. It might even reach into social responsibility at a certain level when you start to help people with product needs that typically aren't represented in the marketplace. So I'm going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum. And some of you may have heard about Liquid Death mountain water. And I actually have the commercial queued up, but I'm not going to play it for sake of time. And also it's offensive. I'll let you look at it yourself. But the company, if you're not familiar with them, they're a company that bet on the Super Bowl in advance on the underdog, and they had a witch come to the Super Bowl to try to influence the outcome. So that tells you a little bit about what they're at. But their commercial is very offensive. Profanity, waterboarding, disrespect for people that have died of water deaths by kayaking and surfing and all kinds of other things. But the ironic thing is that they claim to be a company that's socially responsible because their water comes in an aluminum can, not in bottles. And I'm not the best person to talk about this, but apparently that's more environmentally friendly, the can, I guess, for recycling than the plastic is. So they're claiming social responsibility, going back to what Carlos was saying earlier on, that, that's kind of the pinnacle of the pyramid. But at the same time, the layer under that with ethics is really, questionable to say the least. So I think that's an example where firms, they really need to have all those levels going, being economically viable, legally viable, ethically, sound, and then, and only then can they think about, trying to do something, above and beyond the icing on the cake, because people aren't going to respect them if they're trying to get the one level ahead of the other. So.
And I think that's something that we need to think about is, it's hard to prioritize sometimes when we think about some of the issues that organizations have to make decisions upon. Using an aluminum can, well, aluminum is inherently recyclable. So then, okay, we're socially responsible. But if our marketing message is inauthentic or provides poor representations of particular groups, or in some other way is disparaging, does that make up for having a socially responsible product? How do we make those determinations? What are your thoughts about that? Just opening this up to the group.
I think sometimes it gets a little difficult. Companies get a little panicked by when they have to take a stance, right? And I think one example I can think of is, when Nike came out with the Colin Kaepernick campaign, which a lot of people loved and embraced, and a lot of people were turned off by it or upset by it. And but I think it has to do with the authenticity and the intent of where you're heading. I think brands have been more and more risky or able to take a stand. There's still issues where there's still no-nos for brands to not get involved in, but there's issues on the table about discrimination, whether it's racial or sexual or any other rights, that brands cannot stay quiet. Consumers want brands to speak up to a large extent, say where do you guys stand on the issue of racism or police brutality or whatever the case may be. And before, it used to be a time where brands would completely steer clear from that, and now I think consumers are demanding a higher involvement. But it comes with risk, right? Because you will alienate a lot of people that don't agree with your opinion, right? But I think the Nike example is good in terms of what seemed to be a bit of a risky bet. With things that happened in the years thereafter, everybody seemed to think, well, Nike was really on it, but initially it was definitely a riskier bet.
Well, I think that's a great way to end today's session, thinking about taking those risks as marketers, considering mindfulness in our marketing decisions, effective marketing in addition to ethical marketing, thinking about how influencers play a role in our marketing system and the ethics involved with that. So I want to thank everyone for being with us today. I especially want to thank our panelists, David, Caroline, and Carlos. I'll just remind everyone that this session is part of the American Marketing Association's Collegiate Conversation series. We do have our next session scheduled for March 22nd. And for those faculty in attendance, we have a great faculty development session coming up in just a few weeks. Please do visit us at amapittsburgh.org for more information. And thanks again to our amazing sponsor, the Roland School of Business at Point Park University, for supporting the Collegiate Conversation series. And thanks to all of you for attending. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Thank you.
You all.